Hello, and welcome to another episode of Absolutely Not. I am your host, Katrina Stroll. I'm a certified career coach and an HR consultant. I created this space because I had, yes, sis, had difficulty setting boundaries. And now I just bring organizations and resources on so that people listening and viewing can have a better understanding of setting personal boundaries at work. Before we get started, I just want to define some words that we use frequently on the show. The first word being boundary, something that indicates or fixes a limit. So if for some reason you tell your manager, for a specific reason, you tell your manager, hey, I don't want to be texted on my personal phone, please use my work phone, that's setting a boundary. Gaslighting, to manipulate someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. An example of gaslighting would be if you work in an all white space and you go to your leadership and say, hey, I feel like I'm being pointed out. I feel like I'm being discriminated against. And they say, oh, that's not a problem here. We know that's not a problem here. That's gaslighting. They're not taking in your concerns and they're not seeing you as a value to the organization. Dismissive, an example of dismissive would be if you ask someone to use your chosen name and they are dismissive of that and continue to be dismissive and use names that you no longer use. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about setting boundaries with a mental health condition. My special guest today is Kat McIntosh. Kat's lived experience of bipolar disorder and early trauma has shaped her approach in advocating for inclusive, intersectional, and multidisciplinary approaches when developing policies and systems within service-centered institutions. As the manager of peer advocacy and support services at Mental Health America, she helps in updating the Center for Peer Support site with new research, resources, and content, as well as assist in creating and launching the online platform for peer partners. Kat also advocates for persons living with mental health conditions locally and internationally in her position as Deputy Representative for the Americas, Executive Committee member for Trinidad and Tobago with Global Mental Health Peer Network. She has also served in various capacities in several government and civic societies working on various human rights issues. She is passionate about encouraging society to see individuals through a trauma lens, particularly as it pertains to the LGBTQIA plus community and persons of African descent. She is also committed to understanding how digital development can enrich the lives of those with mental health conditions. Kat holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Caribbean Nazarene College with concentrations in psychology and counseling and earlyhood childhood education. Please help me in welcoming Kat McIntosh. Yay! Kat, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm so excited to have you as a guest. If you could please share with the audience why you're excited to be on today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I find this topic particularly interesting because we don't talk a lot about how persons with mental health conditions need boundaries in the workplace, right? Um, we live in an able-bodied society, and we live in systems that really cater to able-bodied experiences, and oftentimes neglect the idea that we have so many persons in our workforce who have mental health conditions, who have invisible disabilities, who are neurodivergent, and need specific boundaries when it comes to their work. And I think it's important to have that conversation and to help just people people on a whole to understand why that is important and how to even go about doing that.
Oh, I love that. I love it. And I love that you said invisible disabilities because a lot of times these mental health conditions can't be seen from the outside. Even our symptoms cannot be seen from the outside. And we live this every single day. So thank you so much for describing that perfectly. Um, First off, what does a boundary mean to you?
Um, so I heard in this training once that boundaries are the distance between me loving you and loving me simultaneously. And I think that's a perfect definition for a boundary because, especially when it comes to boundaries within the workplace, you can love your job, you can love what you do, but loving what you do should not come at a cost of being disrespectful to yourself and to your experience. And I think that's really important when we talk about boundaries and understanding that um, I I want to love what I do and I want to love what I do well, but I also want to love me in the process of it all. And you don't have to give and take to get that experience.
Right, right. And as we know, with mental health conditions, we need a lot more loving. We need all the loving on the planet. These are not things that we can just leave on the shelf. These are not things that I can take Advil
Yeah.
for real quick and then be good to go to this meeting. No, this is something that I constantly have to give lovings to. So I love that you
Yeah.
said that. It's ongoing, it's forever. Right. Oh man. And so setting boundaries is difficult to begin with. Why, with a mental health condition, would it be even more so?
Oh gosh. We talked about it just earlier, like because with a mental health condition, the experience is invisible. I have often found in my own lived experience the pitch to get people to understand takes a lot more sometimes because I can't explain to people um, when I'm having a really depressed day and I can't show up as my full self. And
Interesting.
um, but that's the reality faces with mental health conditions experience that they may experience things like fibromyalgia or chronic pain or they low fatigue and their body feels just absolutely run down or they're in mania or they're experiencing psychosis and none of these experiences I can showcase to someone. So now I have to get an able-bodied person who's never had this experience, doesn't even know what this can feel like or the extent, of this experience. And I have to get them to understand why I can't do something, so why I need something, so why I need certain accommodations for my experience. So it's a harder conversation to have when you don't have that physical evidence. But just because it's a harder conversation doesn't mean it's not a necessary conversation to be had.
Exactly. Oh man. And that description that you're talking about, the ability to describe is because most ailments or conditions out there have been advertised as such an ailment or a condition. Whenever I talk to mental health professionals, they always bring up diabetes as an example. There's pamphlets on it. There's commercials about it. Call me if you have diabetes, but there's none of that for mental health. Not really. So for me to go into my needs, I would have to go into the entire history of the condition because it just hasn't been showcased as normal or as a condition that needs the lovings that we that we do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then I think the other part of it is that so you have to have you have to have this conversation that not a lot of people around you can easily relate to, right? Then you also have to have a conversation that you may get some very negative comments towards, or you mentioned gaslighting and the definition of gaslighting, but I think that persons with mental health conditions also experience a type of gaslighting as well, because how many times are their experiences nullified or considered to be, you should just it's not as serious, it's not all that and you're expected to push on and you're trying to get people to understand that you can't, and it's just more than me just willing myself to get better, it's a lot more work than that.
Mhm. And the thing about mental health conditions is there's such a stigma out there when you get the diagnosis, even when, but for me, when I got my diagnosis, it was freeing and fulfilling just because now I know what I need to do. For a lot of people, it's concerning. It's kind of detrimental to their what they thought they were to begin with. But
Right.
to all of you out there kind of dealing that with that now with a brand new diagnosis, if you have it, think of it as freeing because now you know the next steps you need to take forward. Just like if you got diagnosed with diabetes, okay, I need to start being healthy, I need to start walking, I need to start eating healthier. Now you know the next steps to move forward. Uh, but yeah, that stigma that's out there is difficult for us to navigate, and I applaud everyone for
Yeah.
doing so. Could you talk about a time that you had difficulty setting boundaries at work because of your mental health condition?
Yeah. Gosh, I think that there's preconceived misconceptions about what having a mental health condition means, right? So you know, it, I think when I started speaking about my experience, I wanted to empower myself, and that's why I started speaking about it to say, hey, like, and I think I went through that emotion as well that you described, where it's like, oh wow, like I understand what's happening to me. Like this is not just in my head. There's like some sort of um, basis towards what I'm experiencing, but I also had unfortunately, I had a supervisor who basically told me that I should not try to get a manager job or any other like high higher level job because she thought that, and it's weird because I do believe that it was well intended in terms of, hey, you have a mental health condition, maybe you should like just have an assistant job so that it's not too much for you. But I had to set my boundary, and I actually had to leave because if my manager can't see me beyond my mental health condition, then this is a place that is going to cause me to be very stagnant, and it's not going to cause me to grow.
Mhm.
And I needed to, as much as I think that she was one of the best managers that I've experienced in my career, I did leave because I was looked over in being promoted to certain positions. Several times it came around, and I'm like, I'm perfect for the job. I'm more qualified than the other folks that you're promoting right now. But I knew it was because of my mental health condition I was being overlooked. And yeah, I set my boundary by just leaving and realizing that um, I had enough of the
Mhm.
situation.
Oh my gosh. And that phrase right there, I have had enough. There's only so much you can do in an organization. There's no way you could have sat down with that manager and for hours, just like, okay, this is how mental health conditions work. And just so you know, I would still be a capable leader. And this is how that would be so much emotional labor on you. And just,
Yeah,
right. And it wouldn't be beneficial to you. Maybe she would have got something from it, but it would have been up to her to get past her bias in moving you forward in that position. Those biases are so scary because there are so many people that are going to hear this and resonate with that story you just told. Every single time somebody said brings up a mental health condition, immediately people draw to, "Oh, okay, they are crazy. They're not going to be able to do this." What I
yeah,
want people to understand is just like any other disability, it is not impeding us from moving forward or climbing the ladder. If someone broke their leg, you wouldn't say, "Wow, that is awful. You will probably not be able to be the best manager here at our organization." No, you would encourage that
right.
person, like, "Hey, take the rest you need. If you need days off, go ahead, heal in a
Yeah,
timely manner, and then come back, do the job, do it the best you can. Boom, boom, boom." But for some
yeah,
reason, some
yeah. I think as well. Um, you know, this talks about accommodations in the workspace. and like why accommodations in the workplace are so important for persons with mental health conditions. And my it's so interesting that that career was when I was in special education. So I had a manager who understood accommodation for persons who had physical disabilities, but couldn't understand the accommodations that was needed for persons who had mental health conditions. And that's to say where our society is at, right? That we can't understand yet sometimes that again our system was built with the able-bodied principle. But even in the unrolling of disability accommodations, we really haven't considered persons with mental health conditions as well. They've still been left out of the conversation. And why it's so important for us, if we are reframing systems and if we are like really trying to be inclusive, as we say we want to be inclusive, why we need to like consider how does accommodations look for someone with a mental health condition? How can I make sure that my workplace is truly inclusive of all abilities? And what does that even begin to look like? And I don't think that we're having that conversation in the way that it should be had.
And I love that earlier. Once again, you said invisible disabilities because
Yeah.
sometimes when people say disabilities, or even when they have it in their policies, or when we think of the Civil Rights Act, or when we think of any of those policies in place, when we hear the word disability, we're not thinking of us. We're not thinking of the people with mental health conditions. But we're in that fold. We're in
Yeah.
that recipe. We are there. And
Yeah.
organizations need to realize that. Oh my gosh. Whew. But back to boundaries. I love that you were able
Hmm.
to leave that organization. Then that was a boundary you set. You said, you know what? I'm not putting any more of myself into this. I cannot convert this woman into believing I'm going to be an amazing manager. So my boundary is I'm going to leave the organization. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone and then receive pushback from setting that boundary at work?
Um, Often no. I must say, besides that experience where I like absolutely just had to leave, I think that I think one of the interesting things I've found in my own lived experience is that so often the boundaries that I need to set with people, they themselves have never thought that I needed that boundary. And I have like I've really realized the importance about speaking up and advocating for myself. I advocate for myself with my mental health condition. I advocate for myself with my psychiatrist or my counselor, but I also have to advocate for myself within my workplace. And I had an HR officer, a really dear yeah, friend, tell me, people will only treat you as much as you allow them to. And you have to teach people sometimes how to treat you. And I found that once I have those conversations and I say, hey, these are my lives, like these are the things that I need. And I explain why, especially when it comes to my mental health condition, I've, I've experienced a dialogue because again, they have an able-bodied experience, so they never even thought that this was something that I could possibly want or need. So yeah, I've experienced some good dialogue. Not to say that there probably haven't been people who have been like, really, but more so, I get the positive experiences, which have been good.
That's awesome. And I love that you use the word dialogue because I recently had a conversation about my mental health conditions and how that dialogue goes. But if that dialogue doesn't take place, if you don't initiate that advocacy for yourself, it will never occur. It just won't happen. So if your manager
Yes.
says, hey, we need you to work 12 hours today, and you don't advocate for yourself and say, hey, there's no way I can, my mental health, like I need to stop working at this time because of my condition, then they would
Yeah.
not know. And it's
Yeah.
really important to say because of my condition, because if you just say I
Yeah.
need to stop working at, I can't work 12 hours, then they won't fully grasp and understand your conditions, you as an individual, and how it affects you. Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah. All of what you just said, and like I've even started speaking up because my diagnosis is bipolar disorder 1, right? And I experienced psychosis symptoms. The part of my bipolar disorder 1 experience is that I experienced a lot of insomnia. And now I'm very honest where I say, hey, I'm going to be coming in at this time because my insomnia was really active last night and I cannot come at 9 a.m. I'm so sorry. Like, and I say that because at the end of the day, if I come at 9 a.m. after an insomnia episode, you're not gonna have me at my best.
Mhm.
I would prefer to stay away, take my rest, and then if I come in at 12, you're gonna get a better cut. And having those dialogues, and again, it's about the fact that they wouldn't know about my insomnia, they wouldn't know about the things that I'm experiencing. So it is really part of the responsibility is on me to communicate those things.
Mhm. And when you communicate those things, you open so many doors, not only for yourself, but for the organization
Yeah,
and for other people in the organization. Because say that
yeah,
manager you told, like, hey, I can't come in because of this and this. Of course, they're not going to say to other people, hey, Kat can come in because of her bipolar disorder. But they will say, hey, Kat's not coming in today for personal reasons. And then maybe somebody else will be like, oh, wow, that's so awesome. I also have issues that I didn't want to be here for. But next time I'm going to say, I don't want to be here.
yeah. For sure, for sure. I think the more you advocate for yourself, you also empower others to advocate for themselves. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to be your own advocate.
Oh, see, and those healthy boundaries that we put in place are always empowering for ourselves, but they're an example for other people what healthy boundaries look like. Um,
Yeah.
through this process of having this space, I've realized there are so many people out there that do not know what boundaries are, myself included. So I'm here with you. But it is amazing to see just from our cultures, our background, how we were raised.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
there's very little talk around boundaries. So I really appreciate you talking about that with me today. Um,
Yeah, that's no problem.
in this realm of growth, especially with your mental health conditions, what have been some of the coping mechanisms through your growth in setting boundaries?
Oh, I think one, like we said before, advocating for myself and speaking up. And I think realizing that me not getting the boundaries isn't because um, the space won't give me the boundary, but it's because I've never asked for the boundary. So really advocating for myself and speaking up, and letting people know, and not being ashamed of my experience with the mental health condition. There are going to be people who would want to shame me,
Mhm.
but I think it's always good to flip that back on them. Like, why would you shame someone with a mental health
Mhm.
condition? Like what makes you that kind of person that will bring shame to that experience? So I love to flip that back on them. But yeah, really speaking up for myself has been like my number one thing. And I think the more that I speak up, the more that I ask, the more I'm able to engage in conversations. And I also do I inform people also in like very subtle ways. So for instance, like Global Mental Health Care Network, an organization that I'm a part of, they recently released this wonderful script that shows how do we incorporate persons with mental health conditions within our workplaces by the things that we do. So for instance, now emails putting action required. And I love sharing these things with people like, hey, take a look at this, and I think that helps like subtly inform persons without me having the conversation. It's kind of like, hey, here's some educational resources for you to
Mhm.
read. And that too has worked really well.
That's so awesome. One that touched me because I have PTSD, and part of that is anxiety. So emails, if I see that red dot, I immediately kind of I need to look at this right now. But action required. That
Yeah.
okay? Who? There's no action required attached. I don't need to look at it right now. That would be amazing. That would
Right.
be fantastic. But I love that you kind of describe internal gaslighting, the fear of somebody being biased against us. So we internally gaslight and say, okay, you don't need to share that information with that person. Hide yourself, hide your condition, hide everything. Don't advocate for yourself. Sit your ass down and be grateful you have this job. That is not the case.
No,
You do need to
no.
advocate for yourself. You do need to share your mental health condition because it affects every single part of your day. For me, it does. Like I just said, emails. It affects that. It affects my response.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah. And I think as well, like, so one of the things that I tell people about is that when Zoom happened and everything became online, no one considered how this Zoom experience would affect people with psychosis. Um, but we had meetings and entire HR departments forcing people to be on video, forcing people to like look at a screen. And for me, as someone with psychosis, that screen image, like if it's like one on one, like now I'm good. But if it's like a stream of folks, like my psychosis starts playing. Um, but again, nobody will know unless I tell them.
Mhm.
And now I have started to say, hey, do you mind if I keep my video off? Like, I have psychosis and these things really bother me. Or today's a day where I'm kind of dissociated, so I know if I put my video on, it's gonna affect me in this way. Do you mind? And 9 times out of 10, I mean, I have never come across a person who has said, no, I need you to be on video. Like, once I explain it, like people are like, oh yeah, that's fine. Do you mind if I take mine off? And like, and we're okay and we're completely cool. Um, but again, if I didn't say anything, nobody would know and I would just push through. And you mentioned a point in terms of like how we've been raised, right? And I think especially as Black folks, like as a Black Caribbean woman, I have been taught to push through, and you don't upset the status quo. You don't rock the boat. You just go along with it. Um, but that's me just being disrespectful to myself and my experience. And I'm not doing that anymore. I don't know. I don't. I can't do that because it doesn't bring the best out of me. If I have to push through this episode, um, it doesn't bring the best out of me. I'm not producing my best work. I'm not being my best self. And I would think that, and that's how I kind of like to reframe it to folks that I would think that you would want me to be my best self. And if you want me to be my best self, these are the ways that I can show up as my best self.
Yes, Kat. Oh, and you just gave people so many nuggets and examples of what to say to that manager. Because as soon as you
Yeah.
said, "I've never come across somebody that said no," it gave me a bit of flashbacks because I've come across those managers that I know would have said no, or I have told myself would have
Mm,
said no. But when we
right.
advocate for ourselves, then we learn about other people. If you advocate
Yeah.
for yourself and they say, no, you need to be on camera at all times, then you learn, oh wow, this is not the inclusive environment I believed y'all to be.
Mm,
You lied to me.
yeah, exactly. 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 So it's
There's
good. It's good
people-
to put it out there because now let's see what kind of response I get from you. you know?
Yeah, and this journey that we're on with our mental health conditions, or even somebody who doesn't have a mental health condition, it is a journey of growth and learning. So we are constantly learning about other people, and you advocating for yourself is a chance to grow, but is also a chance to learn about the environments you are in. Um, this
Yeah.
position is not forever. This is but you are not forever, but you are going to be with you for the rest of your life. So if anything, advocate for yourself, because that organization is not always going to be there. But
Yeah. And I would just add that like it it also causes and it challenges people to grow as well. And I think that's another big part of the script that you to consider that, you know, unless someone has been exposed to someone with a mental health condition through a family member or whatever, they don't know. So you give them that opportunity to grow and see what they do with it. And if they do nothing with it, then you can say, oh, this is not the space for me. but give them that opportunity, you know?
That is so amazing. You have shared a couple of go-to phrases with us. I love it. I love that you've shared so many times that you've been able to flip it with people. But what is your number one go-to phrase on setting boundaries?
Ooh. Number one go-to phrase. I I think my number one is communicating my needs. Um, it is hard as a Caribbean woman who's never been taught about needs to communicate it. But I've tried my best now when I have conversations to specifically say, I need A, B, C, D, and really spell it out for them, um, so that you can't say that I didn't say. Uh, and I think that and I think as well, it creates a respect to the situation that if someone is if someone is crossing my boundary, I'm not telling them that, hey, you're doing this and you're doing that or whatever. And people generally find those kinds of statements come across as tough, right? But when I say it as, hey, I need A, B, C, D in order to function, then it becomes about my experience. And it becomes about, if you respect me, you respect my needs. So that's probably my go-to, definitely.
Oh, I love that because in meetings people cross boundaries without your knowing, and our first reaction sometimes is to be like, "Yo, hold up! Like, what was that? What the hell was that?" And if to them it will feel like an attack, and for you it'll feel like advocating. But that I need part is it gives a pause to that person and you so that you can spell it out in your brain before you tell them, and it gives them like, oh, I
Mhm.
had no idea that you needed these things. I will think about
Yeah, yeah,
implementing them. That's awesome.
yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, Kat, you have shared so much insight with me tonight. I am now going to open the floor to any questions they may have for you. You are now in the hot seat because you know everything about boundaries. You'll be able to answer any questions that they give to you. So I will give them a couple minutes. Maybe they'll type it in the chat, or you can come off mute if you'd like. Ask questions to Kat, and let's get started with the rapid fire. Go ahead. You always awkwardly hum during this part until somebody asks a question. So let me start. While I wait for y'all to ask questions, I do have a question for you, Kat. Um, why do you stay in your field of mental health? For me, even the show is kind of triggering, and even advocating on as much as I can advocate, sometimes it becomes a lot. So I could not imagine doing your position. Why do you stay in that role?
That's a great question. I do this because I've always held this view that I'm not the only one. When I was 16 and experiencing symptoms and had absolutely no one to turn to, um, I would have liked to find someone, and had, someone who say, hey, I have a lived experience of mental condition too, and you can get through this. And I think that if I had that person at that age, I tell people I wonder where I would have been. Not to say that not happy with my life, but I just do feel like um, a lot of times faces with mental health conditions are at a disadvantage because they feel like they are alone in the situation. And I do this just so that I can remind myself and remind others I'm not the only one in this, and that there's power in community. And I really believe that. I think that if more persons would talk to each other about their mental health, would talk to each other about their experiences, like we can get through this together. But the problem is that oftentimes all of us are in a vacuum thinking that we're the only one experiencing it. And that's not true. So I see to just, you know, be some sort of flight to someone to say, hey, I have psychosis, I have experienced I was 16 and I'm 31 now.
I'm not crying, but I am tearing up because every everything you said is so true. Specifically, I am a Black female veteran who has PTSD, and on a lot of the pamphlets for PTSD, it's clean cut white males who they have it because of da 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 da. So the the community that I was looking for just wasn't present until I started being honest about myself. When you're honest about yourself, people start, oh my gosh, I can't even say this. People start coming to you because they want to be honest with themselves too. And they were just looking for
Yeah.
somebody to do it first. And Kat, you have
Yeah.
done that for me so that I can do that for other people. And then somebody else will hear this and they will continue to do it. So I just appreciate all the work you are doing. And I cannot thank you enough for just being your true self.
Yeah. I I love that you talked about being authentic, and I think that um I think that when you have a mental health condition, at least from my experience, it's so hard to be authentic because you go into so many spaces. And even though people, we see all these slogans that says, hey, reach out for help and all these things, when you do speak about it, people can box you in and people can shut you down and shut you up or try to shut you up. Um, but there are also all these people out there who are like, oh my God, like you get it. Like you get what I'm experiencing. You get what I'm going through. Oh my gosh, you're gonna have me teary the stereotyping with you today. I remember feeling alone. Community was my breakthrough. And that came, I had a mentor. I had a mentor who she was a woman. She was the CEO of a nonprofit organization. She had bipolar disorder 1. And she was the first person that told me that, hey, what you're doing is like, you're not alone in this. And I think if we just keep doing things, then I would hope that for the young, for lack of a better word, but half the crap that I would have had to go through, you know?
Exactly. And for all the people that are listening to this episode, whether later or now, um, that you are going to be that person for somebody else. Kat is that person for somebody. Her mentor was that person for Kat. And this train of being authentic just keeps going. We just have to be our full selves when we can. And I, I, I know that this shit is difficult. I know it's really hard to try to break through the stigma. As soon as
Yeah.
people hear you have a mental health condition, they immediately go to crazy, or just like how your manager did, like, oh, maybe you should try to stay in this box then because you probably won't be able to go out of it. But I'm here to let you all know that that box is too small for you. That box does not contain you. And Kat, myself, and everyone else out there, being our authentic selves, we're here to tell you that that box is too small for you. You don't have to live in it. Oh my gosh, Kat. See, I told you. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us tonight, though. I cannot thank you enough for just being an amazing person and for continue to advocate for mental health. Exactly, Patricia. And sometimes it can be weaponized
Thank you so
against
much.
you, but but authenticity and vulnerability, yeah, you definitely have to bring it to the forefront. Patricia just shared that sometimes it can be weaponized against you, your authenticity. Have you ever had experience in that, Kat?
Oh yeah. I think that I think people have a way of, when you're authentic, especially you're authentic, but there's no way that you can share the full story, right? So I can be authentic about my psychosis, but there's no way I can share the full story of, hey, look at all the childhood trauma that I've been through, that have, led me to this space. So people would say, oh, okay, you experienced psychosis, or you're dissociating. Um, is it that bad? Like, is it that, is it that serious? Or, and people would say such negative things, but it's also based on such ignorance,
Mm.
right? Because had they really understood it, they would naturally own. I have really chosen to not to focus on that, just because, not that it's not hard, not that it doesn't hurt me, but there's so much more people that connect with my story than those who are against my story. And my focus is on those that connect with it. Not everyone's gonna understand. Can't expect anything else from them, But if I try to just keep that focus.
Okay. I love that you said the word ignorance. That is a word that describes most of, and like we said before, there are pamphlets for diabetes, there are pamphlets for broken leg, there are pamphlets for the common cold, but there are no pamphlets for a lot of the mental health conditions that we're bringing authentically to the workplace, or at least they don't have it on the front page. They don't have it at the receptionist desk to talk about. But we need to continue to bring it to the front page, and we're doing that by just not, I can only think of the word combating that ignorance with authenticity. Just
Yeah.
saying, I really cannot describe my full story, but this is my story. I'm sharing with you my mental health condition because it's real and it's true. And these are the things I need in my life. These are my boundaries. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Patricia shared, dismissive and invalidation can definitely happen as well. Yes, definitely. I remember at my first job outside of the military, I shared that I had PTSD and major depressive disorder. And immediately when you hear a veteran has PTSD, they think of war, and they immediately started asking me really weird questions about, have I killed someone? Or when was the last time you were in combat? And da, 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 da. And a lot of that, one, is dismissive to the fact that I just told you I have a mental health disorder, and you're dismissing the fact that I'm a person in front of you. Like, cool, that's so awesome. Let's talk about traumatic things that may or may not have caused your mental health disorder. And once again, it's just because those pamphlets are not out there yet. So we're kind of the only people walking around talking about it, but it's important to
Yeah.
do so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I want to say, like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, right? Because it wasn't fair. I think about, even like on social media, like, we share so much on social media, even on, and going back to our workspaces, we share in our workspace, hey, we have these things. And for some reason, people feel like they have a claim to our story. Um, and sometimes I've learned to kind of gently check people, and just say, hey, I am willing to say ABC, but no, I will not be talking about DEF,
Mm.
and leave it as that. Because I have a right to my story. You don't, you don't get to ask me all these triggering, traumatic things, and I need to pour all my childhood experiences out before you. You don't get that right. So yeah, like, again, I go back to the point that if you don't tell people how to treat you, they will treat you however they want to treat you. So I gently check them. And they actually, and one of my colleagues, shared I jokes about that, and be like, actually,
I love that. Actually, you can follow up actually with almost anything. And I love that you said actually. That's gonna be my my new go-to now is actually, I don't want to talk about that. Or actually, I know that we talked about this boundary before. I need you to email me before you just call me on Zoom real quick. I don't like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that's my new go-to actually. Okay, so you have provided us with so much insight tonight, and I cannot thank you enough. But my questions have come to an end. Is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap it up for tonight?
Oh, I think that living with a mental health condition is hard. And living with a mental health condition in a space that doesn't understand mental health conditions is even harder. Um, and one of the main things that I did for myself was building a tribe around me and having people that understood it. Because not everybody's gonna get it. Not everybody's gonna be sensitive to my mental health condition. Some people might even think, hey, she's too sensitive and she wants too much and all these things. But I found having a tribe of folks. So I advocate wholeheartedly for peer support. And peer support really is persons with lived experience of mental health conditions providing hope to one another through that shared experience. And just having that space and those peer support spaces where I can say, these are all the things that that just happened. I just need a space to just vent the things has really helped me in my own recovery. So yeah, I definitely advocate for having a tribe around you because it helps.
Um, Oh, okay, Kat. I really appreciate that sentiment because that's something my therapist and I have actually just gone over is that support
Mm,
circle you need when having a mental health condition. For someone with
yeah,
my mental health conditions, I am constantly hyper vigilant in just any space at any time. I feel like I am unsafe. So to
right.
have a safe space to go into is really important to have. So a sense of community and the community that I'm building, even within this show, is important to me. And for anybody listening out there, please build your community. Please build your safe space or whatever you need that's important to you. Oh my gosh, Kat. But thank you so much for sharing that and how important it is. Peer support, man. See, and that's why you do what you do because it's so important. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love being able to talk about this topic. I think it's needed. So thank you so much for having this space.
Oh, absolutely. And I owe every special guest that comes on this show, I thank them because you have given me a chance to grow as a person. I have taken away so much from this episode alone. I know that whoever is listening or whoever watches this in the future is going to take so much from it as well. So thank you so much. Um,
No problem.
Once again, this is absolutely not. I am Katrina Stroll. My special guest today was Kat McIntosh. She is available at any time. Reach out to her. Okay, that's a lie. She's not available at any time. Boundaries. But please reach out to her if you have any questions about mental health
Yeah.
conditions and setting boundaries. Feel free to visit my website, www.absolutelynotwithkatrina.com, to review, subscribe, or donate to the show. And we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.